Stormy Daniels' lawyer testifies in trial, day 9, Bragg's prosecution in New York. And it wasn't just Stormy's lawyer. This guy also represented Karen McDougal. Both of those women came at Donald Trump with claims, and there's questions about how this all got started and how it made its way, these claims, to David Pecker before Pecker allegedly gave it to Cohen, and then Cohen brought it to Trump. But some of us have some idea, some theories maybe, that maybe Cohen was facilitating some of these interactions, given the fact that we heard that Cohen and Keith Davidson may have known each other before these claims were brought in the first place. So some interesting connections afoot. But in trial, day 9, brought to us by Inner City Press, Matthew Russell Lee reporting, all of his links in the description below. Be sure you're supporting him and following him. We also had, before we get to Davidson, we had Gary Farrow, Michael Cohen's banker, and some other people who are authenticating some business records before we'll see what Trump said at the conclusion of the day. And so we know who's coming up. We know who Gary Farrow is, Michael Cohen's banker. Let's jump over to Inner City Press, Matthew Russell Lee reporting. Trial day 9 is in session. Trump has arrived in the courtroom, looking sharp, blue suit, red tie. Photographers come in, they're taking photos. Trump leans to the right, whispers in Todd Blanche's ear. Door bursts open. Clerk says, "All rise. Please be seated." Judge Mercant is on the bench now. Before the jury is brought in, we have a couple preliminary matters. He says, "Mr. Blanche, Trump's defense team, which days had you requested off for the high school graduation?" He says, "Good morning, Your Honor. May 17th and June 3rd. Remember, we had 2 graduation dates, one for Barron Trump, one for one of the lawyer's kids." The judge says, "May 17th and June 3rd, huh? All right." Well, Mercant says, "We finished jury selection so quickly. I think Mr. Trump can attend the graduation on May 17th. So he gets to go see Barron graduate. Isn't that nice? Thanks, Judge. But on the June 3rd date, we're not sure if the jury's going to be deliberating on that one. So I'll decide on that later. That will depend. But we'll come back on that one." So Trump gets to go to the high school graduation. Good. And I think he was kind of locked in on that one. He was getting really criticized and ridiculed for that from a lot of people. So it was the right ruling. Now he says, "I will now rule on contempt." And we read through that entire filing. But he says, "On the 10 incidents, the people have met their burden on all incident but one. And hereby I order Donald Trump is now fined $1,000 for each. 2 through 3 and 4 through 10. Is that understood?" Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Of course, we read through that previously. If there's nothing further, the judge says, "Bring in the jury." Jury comes in, everybody stands and sits back down. Okay, they're seated. And we continue. Now, Mr. Farrow, who is Michael Cohen's banker, is back on the stand. Last week, we left off with him. Prosecutor had just called him up. He's been sworn in. Remember, you're under oath. Okay. Says Mr. Farrow, Cohen's banker, and he talked about how Cohen would come in. Remember last week, he would say Cohen would come in and need to form new LLCs, like immediately, or form new bank accounts. He'd form new LLCs, get new bank accounts. It'd happen immediately. Everything's urgent, he'd say. Okay, relax. So he's showing him some documents. He says, "I want to focus on this document. It's called First Republic. You see this? What is this?" He says, "Oh, that's a signature card. It's for Essential Consultants, LLC. And who are the signers on this document?" He looks at it and says, "Only Michael Cohen." "And what are these documents, Mr. Farrow?" Says, "That's the tax ID number that you get from the IRS." "And where does it say this LLC was formed?" He says, "Probably Delaware. Most LLC I deals with are formed there, maybe Delaware." "And this EIN, what is it?" He says, "EIN, it's like a social security number, but for a business. It's how we identify businesses." "And why did it take hours to open up this account? Why did it take so long to open it?" He says, "Well, Michael Cohen is not our only customer. There are other things that take precedent. Mikey can't just run in here and come get it done. So it takes a while." "Did Mr. Cohen say that it would be used when he was creating this business account to make a contribution on behalf of political candidates?" He says, "No." "And if you've ever set up a business account, they ask you all those questions. Are you going to be doing any gambling on here? What kind of business are you doing? What kind of videos are you making, Rob? All right, relax. Okay, it's a YouTube channel. Okay, relax." So they set it up, right? They want to make sure you're not screwing around with federal law. "But did Mr. Cohen tell you that this was going to be used for politics?" Farrow says, "No." "Did any of the opening paperwork indicate that the account would be used to, pay an adult film star?" He says, "No, that's not an industry that we do work with because this wasn't an adult industry bank account." He says, "Okay, So in other words, they didn't tell you what the purpose of this account was, is what he's hinting at." He says, "Mr. Farrow, what's this?" He says, "That's a transfer from a home equity line of credit, probably Cohen's, to Essential Consultants, LLC. And on this document, who's on this document? Who is Laura Cohen?" He says, "Oh, that's Michael Cohen's spouse." "And so before this document is executed, how many people have to approve this, Mr. Farrow?" He says, "2. "And what's this?" "A wire authorization form." "Who's it from?" "Essential Consultants." "And what is the listed purpose of this authorization wire?" He says, "It's a retainer." "That's what Michael Cohen told us. Retainer." "And what's this?" "It's another outgoing wire transfer form. It's an internal document that we use. And I want to introduce Government Exhibit 378. What is this?" this? Oh, that looks like an email to Michael Cohen. It says the wire's on the way. And with this wire, who was it wired to? It was wired to Keith Davidson and Associates. Interesting, right? Keith Davidson is going to be the lawyer who is bringing the claims Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal brought. Did any of these wire transfers say it was on behalf of a political candidate? He says no. No further questions. Government sits back down. Judge Merchan, cross to the defense. Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, stands up, says, good morning, Mr. Farrow. Before today, you met with the government prosecutors. Is that right? He says, well, he actually says, I'll be clear on this one. I don't like to call them the people because I actually don't think they represent the people. They represent the government. So stop saying you represent the people. You represent the government. So just deal with it. You met with the people? This guy doesn't get it. He's like, what? Please explain what the people means. The prosecutors. He's like, oh, I get that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, these people aren't, they're representing the government bureaucrats. They don't represent us. Did you meet them last year, the prosecutors? He's like, oh yeah, those losers? Yeah, now I know who you're talking about. Did you meet with them last year? He says, yeah, once I did last year. And I met with them twice this year. Did you meet other law enforcement? He says, yeah, I did, in DC. And when did you go to DC, Mr. Farrow? He says, 2018. Now, who's paying for your lawyer today? He says, Flagstar is, my employer. He says, not Chase? It's not paying? No, Flagstar is. Okay, and you opened Michael Cohen's account, is that right? He says, well, I don't do the paperwork, but I help. And you said earlier, Mr. Farrow, you said Michael Cohen was difficult. Is that right? Can you tell me about that? He says, yeah, he's a pain, man. Dude's a nightmare. His desire is that everything be done quickly. I try to rationalize with clients that things may not be so urgent. Relax. And that just sounds like Michael Cohen. He's that friend who's like, I need you to call me back like right now. You're like, hey man, what's up? What's the problem? He's like, I couldn't decide what I wanted to have for dinner tonight. Just wanted to see what your thoughts were. I'm like, what? Now, as of March 23rd, 2023, was Michael Cohen still your client as of March last year? No. And once this information came out, he says, I was taken away from the relationship with Michael Cohen. Interesting. So you were removed from his account? He says, yeah. Are you familiar, Mr. Farrow, with the term de-risking? He says, no, I'm actually not familiar with that term. He says, well, okay, well, how about this? If the bank no longer wants a customer, is there something you do? Like, you had no reason to think Mr. Cohen was opening up a shell corporation, did you? No. If he had told you that he was opening up a shell corporation, would you have opened it? No, I would not have opened it. Unless it was to own a home or a yacht or a jet or something, to keep ownership confidential. I could have done something for that, but no, not here. Mr. Farrow, do you remember getting an email bounced back on March 17th, 2017 that was telling you that Michael Cohen was now Trump's personal lawyer? He says, yeah, but that was an errant email. He says, Mr. Farrow, Cohen's banker, what's a PEP? He says, that's a politically exposed person. And are you aware that an official's lawyer is also considered a PEP? So an official is a PEP and their lawyer might also be a PEP. So I was not aware of that. And if he had been identified as a PEP, objection, probably calls for speculation, says, let me ask this way. If you have ever had a PEP, what does it entail, right? Didn't like, what would you do if, he rephrases. Have you ever had a PEP before? What do you do with them? We monitor them. In September 2017, did Michael Cohen say he needed to speak with you? Farrow says, I don't remember. You never spoke with Michael Cohen about Donald Trump? No. And you never spoke with President Trump? No. No further questions. Okay. So Cohen went and did this on his own, never brought up Trump, never said he was doing anything on behalf of Trump. You never talked to Trump. Sounds like Cohen just did it on his own. Okay. No further questions. Any redirect. Prosecutor says, this is crazy. Why was Michael Cohen cut off from the banks? Says the prosecutor. Farrow says, not telling the truth. No further questions. All right. So even the prosecutor who is about to call Michael Cohen is now acknowledging that Michael Cohen is a liar, right? No further questions. Michael Cohen is dishonest. And the government's own witnesses are bringing that to our attention. Recross, Todd Blanche is back up. Did the shutdown mean that appropriate due diligence wasn't done in the first place? No, not necessarily. Maybe shutting Michael Cohen off later. Does it mean that you screwed up when this was formed or you learned after? No, we could have learned after, right? We could have done our appropriate due diligence at the beginning and then cut it off later. No further questions from Todd. Judge Merchan says, all right, jurors, we're done with this witness. Let's take our morning recess. They leave. We got business to attend to while the jurors are on break. Government says, I'm handing up agreed redactions, Your Honor. The red ones are those that we still have a problem with that are in dispute. In this one, in the midst of the negotiations around Stormy Daniels, Miss Rodriguez says shady stuff. And in this one, it says Daily Mail is afraid of Trump. Miss Rodriguez is not alleged to be a co-conspirator, unlike Dylan Howard, so they're not coming in for the truth of the matter asserted. Now, of these three, we can live without the first. And Trump's lawyer says they're talking about, it looks like some exhibits with some redactions on some documents. And Todd Blanche says, Your Honor, these items could confuse the jury. Shady stuff, even with a limiting instruction, and saying the Daily Mail is scared of Trump, that's all hearsay. That's our very strong belief. And he says, okay, stop. I'll rule after the break. I'll think about it. Anything else? Says, Your Honor, another prosecutor, yeah, with today's finding of contempt that you just issued out, we would intend to cross-examine Trump if he chooses to testify about that. We're ready for a Sandoval hearing. And he says, we haven't even read the hearing yet. We haven't even read the motion yet. He says, well, you can read it and then respond to it. You just issued the contempt order like 2 seconds ago. We haven't even read it yet. All right, you can read it and then you can respond. It says, we should be able to elicit evidence about Trump's, and remember the Sandoval hearing, the Sandoval motion was about all of the prior bad acts. So remember the prior list that came out from Matthew Colangelo. I don't know if that's who this is speaking. Maybe it is. But Colangelo drafted a big litany of all of the Trump problems. You were held in contempt and anger-ons, and Chutkin had to issue a gag order. Okay, all of these things. He says, well, oh, great. You just held him in contempt. We'd like to add that to the list so that if he is taking the stand, we get to cross-examine him and hit him with that. Oh, you were also just found in contempt, weren't you? Says we should be able to elicit evidence about Trump's online harassment of Cohen and Daniels, right in front of the jury. So isn't it true you're harassing them here today? Like you're harassing Michael Cohen? No wonder he's lying all over the place, because you're harassing him with your MAGA army in light of the opening statements. Trump says, no, Your Honor, there should be a proffer, okay? We will cross-examine about bias. Sure. They say, no, it shows consciousness of guilt. They say, but Trump was speaking about Cohen's plea in Southern District of New York. Trump was never even charged there. So do you need a ruling on that? Prosecutor says by Thursday, that would all help us. So the judge says, okay, now it's our break. See you back here in a few minutes. We're back. Merchan comes back. He says, you know, I've been thinking about this over my pee break, and I said that the defense opened the door. And I think they have, but what are we going to use all this for? So I'll allow you to use it to rebut, for example, that they are not making as much money as people think. And so the government says, okay, so the ruling is then that People's Exhibit 171, Government's 171 is in, but it comes in with redactions. All right, we don't know what this exhibit is, so we're kind of talking blind here. But he says, okay, so it can come in with some redactions. So, okay, so it sounds like that's settled. Now, Merchan says also, here's another update. A juror wants to know if they can fly on May 24th before Memorial Day. Can they fly on that day? Do the parties agree? Yeah, they can fly, no problem. Jury comes back in, all rise, please be seated. Jury, okay, here's the deal. We're not working on May 17th, we got a graduation, and we're not working on May 24th, we have a conflict, and so just mark your calendars accordingly. We're ready to proceed. Mr. Prosecutor, government, please call your first witness. Government stands up, says, prosecutors call Dr. Robert X. Browning. Government says, all right, Dr. Browning, what is your job? He says, oh, well, I'm the archivist at C-SPAN. Like, oh, okay, well, we watch a lot of C-SPAN here. Okay, was C-SPAN subpoenaed by Manhattan? He says, yeah, we did. We got a subpoena. We turned over videos. And are you here? Can you recognize Donald Trump? He says, yeah. Do you have the North Carolina rally in October 2016 in your archives, Mr. Browning? Yes. Well, we offer that into evidence. Let's play it. So Trump's on the screen. He says, you know, it's a phony deal. I have no idea who these women are. They get some free fame. They get to file a claim, blah, blah, blah. Play the full video or a portion of it. Dr. Browning, is that a portion of the videos from your archives? Yes, it is. Great. Next exhibit. Trump's in front of a Trump-Pence sign. He says, these are all lies. Then he's in front of flags. Trump speaks on Michael Cohen. The guy's a liar. Are these all Trump? Okay, no further questions. So this guy basically is brought in to authenticate these videos, get the videos admitted as exhibits. They throw them in front of the juries. Any questions from the defense? No questions, Your Honor. Yeah, that's Trump. He said the thing's fine. Next, government calls someone else. Philip Thompson. This guy is a person who works for Esquire Deposition Solutions. He might have been the person who actually did the depo, transcribed it, the court reporter. He says, no, he's not the reporter. He's a custodian of the records. He says, okay, Philip Thompson, quick. You're a records custodian? Yeah, I'm here under subpoena. Did you turn over the transcript of the video from the Trump deposition in Carroll versus Trump? Again, right? See how they snowball all these cases? They just got to crack a little bit in and they can leverage that, parlay that into other cases. So now, E. Jean Carroll, this deposition comes in a new criminal trial that's totally unrelated. There's no criminal, sexual assault charges here. There's nothing here about any of that. But they're just going to say Trump has this scandal, right? This scandalous conspiratorial behavior, even though there's not even a conspiracy charge in this case. 34 counts of false business entries, false business records. Prosecutor plays this clip. We know the clip. Prosecutor says, please read the transcript. He says, fine. He says, okay, Roberta Kaplan says, so this is great. So we're reading X script, someone who is testifying, reading a transcript. This is like Inception law. Are you familiar with the Access Hollywood tape, says Roberta Kaplan? Trump says, yeah. Okay, no further questions. Access Hollywood tape, great. Todd Blanche, any questions from you, from the defense? No questions. All right, you may step down. Now, those two people who authenticated those videos are now done, and we get a new witness who is in. Now, this guy's name is Keith Davidson, and this is what what Keith Davidson looks like so we understand who this fella is. And as we've already heard from prior testimony from David Pecker, who is this fellow down here who testified, actually, I think was one of the first witnesses to testify, came out and told us that the way this whole story developed is that Keith Davidson, from his testimony, would approach him and bring him these stories, right? Because David Pecker runs the National Enquirer. So he's got this big net. He's got a whole team of people that are out there constantly trying to find information that is publishable, that's going to sell a bunch of magazines. So he happens to be friends with Trump. They run in the same circles. They know each other. He says, if I come across anything bad, I'll let you know, so-called. Same thing that he did for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Same thing that he did for Rahm Emanuel. Same thing that he's done for many other people, because it's just ordinary part of being a billionaire superstar. Just happens. So this relationship is what was allegedly in place. And theoretically, Pecker says that he would take these claims and have a conversation with Michael Cohen about it. And then Cohen, of course, would be the Trump lawyer. Cohen would then say, oh no, all of these stories are really bad for my client. So then Cohen would run this up over to, let's say, Trump or people in the Trump orbit, and they would say, okay, whatever, make this all go away. So then Cohen would, then get involved with Keith Davidson and negotiate this whole thing with Pecker. And then when Cohen facilitated that, right, he's the liaison, he gets paid big money. He gets a big fat check, and they compensate him for that work. Now, what we've also learned is that there are some other interesting connections between Michael Cohen and Keith Davidson. And so we're asking ourselves, what is the theory of this case going to be? Could the theory of the case be that liar perjurer Michael Cohen was the person who was really planting this whole thing, right? The red arrow is Cohen is the inception point. Cohen is the person who says, man, we got this little scam that we can run here. Cohen, who evidently, allegedly knew Keith Davidson before all of these claims were even brought by McDougal or by Stormy Daniels. Cohen was feeding him that because Cohen can't bring these claims, but he facilitates the deal. David Pecker is just this kind of innocent middleman, around and around we go. So Keith Davidson is now up. He's on the stand. Here is how that unfolds. The government calls Keith Davidson. He comes in. Mr. Davidson, you promise to tell the truth, God? Yes, I do. Mr. Davidson, how old are you? 53. Graduated from Boston College and Whittier Law School. And I work now at Davidson and Associates, and we do media cases. Says, any sexual abuse cases? He says, yeah. Interesting question, because that's not charged here. In 2015 and 2017, did you use non-disclosure agreements, right? None of these women alleged abuse. They alleged consensual relationships that were then NDA'd up. No one's claiming the R. That's what E. Jean Carroll was claiming before a jury said that she's a liar. In 2015 to 2017, did you use non-disclosure agreements? He says, yeah. And do you know someone named Gina Rodriguez? We were talking about her in the government's exhibit previously. Says, yeah, she manages reality TV type talent. Says, have you represented Gina Davidson? Sorry, Gina Rodriguez, he says. Gina Rodriguez. We're not married, okay? You're Mr. Davidson. It's Gina Rodriguez. Prosecutor says, oh, sorry about that. Now, how about Dylan Howard? Who's that? Dylan Howard, remember, works for AMI and National Enquirer as their content guy. So he would also field some of the stories and say, this is good, this is bad, make offers, and so on. How about Dylan Howard? He says, oh, he was a friend, and sometimes we work together and overlap about tabloid media, kind of work in the same space. Did you negotiate the sale of certain stories to tabloids? Rarely. No, didn't do that often. Are you familiar with David Pecker? Davidson says, yeah. AMI and the National Enquirer. Dylan Howard's boss was David Pecker. And I've only dealt with him about, 4 times in my life, maybe. Don't really know David all that well. What about Michael Cohen? Yeah, Michael Cohen. And something about my client, Miss Clifford, who is, of course, as we know, is Stormy Daniels. Do you recognize this thumb drive, Mr. Davidson? And so, again, Davidson represented Stormy and McDougal in these claims and these settlements. And then we saw Avenatti come in much later after the fact. Do you recognize this thumb drive, Mr. Davidson? He says, yeah, I produced these records pursuant to a subpoena. And how about Karen McDougal? Do you know her? Yes, I do. I met her about 25 years ago. In fact, she was dating a friend of mine. Then I represented her about a personal interaction that she had. With whom was that person and that personal interaction? He says, Donald Trump. Her brother-in-law, Jake, linked us, and that's how I met her. Mr. Davidson, Stormy and McDougal's lawyer, previous lawyer, says, I want to show you this retainer. Can you look at this? He says, yeah. It's your retainer? Yeah. Recognize it? Yeah. What does this mean? He says, well, there were exclusive arrangements with media outlets in exchange for money. So we would have deals where there would be exclusivity. Someone would get paid and we'd give them him our image and likeness and, do some work for him. Now, did you inform Mr. Davidson, Miss McDougal, that you could negotiate for her? I'm sorry, I won't discuss our communications. As you know, those are protected by attorney-client privilege. Well, I want to look at your text messages with Dylan Howard. Put those up on the screen there and blow those up, expand those up so we can see them. He says, Mr. Davidson, what does this one mean? That he would get more for this story than anyone. David Pecker published Trump magazine. AMI had implied that they endorsed Mr. Trump's candidacy. So when I sent that, I was saying that he would get more for this story than anyone else. So Davidson, sounds like, we can't see the text, but filling in the gaps here, it sounds like it's a text message from maybe Davidson to Dylan on behalf of McDougal or Stormy saying, hey, I got this McDougal story that I would get more for this story than anyone. And I don't know who he's getting it, who he's talking to. So it's Howard is going to get more for this story. So give him a higher price point, or let's see. It says, did you arrange a meeting between Miss McDougal and Dylan Howard? So lawyer arranges content guy from National Enquirer to meet with one of Trump's claimants, Miss McDougal, who is the former playmate who has the, as we know, droopy booby. Now, Davidson says, yeah, Johnny Crawford was also there. He's a friend of Karen's, a police officer from Arizona. And we discussed the personal interaction of Miss McDougal with Donald Trump. And since this was in front of others, what did Miss McDougal say, right? So you don't have attorney-client privilege, so there were other people there. So tell me about that conversation. Well, she told us all that she had a romantic affair of several weeks or months with Donald Trump some years ago. Just told us all of it. And what was the purpose of this meeting? He says, well, it was sort of a proffer session, right? We showed up with this content guy. He's like, all right, well, I'm buying this story. So like, is it a real story or not? What's the deal? Like, tell me about this relationship. Where was this? Okay. Some sort of a proffer session. So Dylan meets with McDougal. He says, all right, okay, let me see. He says, I'm going to run back to New York. Let me run it up the flagpole. Okay, who's the flagpole? Who would that person be? Says the prosecutor. He says, Pecker. So they went and talked to Pecker, but they did not buy it right away. They said Karen McDougal didn't have enough documentary evidence of this thing. And I said, well, don't forget Michael Cohen. The girl is being cornered by the estrogen mafia. What on earth is that? So there's another text. What is that? Don't forget Michael Cohen. The girl is being cornered by the estrogen mafia. What did you mean when you said that? He says, well, it was a regrettable text that I sent. There were several women leaning on Karen to sign the deal with ABC and not go with National Enquirer. And remember, Karen has a droopy booby problem. And it's unfortunate. We don't like that to happen. We want him to be nice and healthy. But there's a situation where she wants to talk about this problem that she has had and write about it, put her on Dancing with the Stars so she can helicopter those around, whatever. It's part of a rehabilitation of her career. She was Playboy Playmate, like Playmate of the Month for a long time, of the year, and then suddenly her career crashes. So she wants to reignite it. So there's a bunch of women pushing her to sign the deal. Go on Dancing with the Stars, man. So how did Dylan Howard reply? So he sends this to Dylan Howard. Hey, don't forget Michael Cohen. The girl's being cornered by the estrogen mafia, which are all the view gals. How did Dylan Howard reply to that? He says, well, they would have an offer to us by Monday. Okay, so Davidson's trying to get National Enquirer to hit him back. He's like negotiating, right? Cohen's going to tell Trump, and if you don't buy this story from us, she's going to go with ABC. So he's just doing, lawyer negotiation stuff. So they said from National Enquirer that they would have an offer for us by Monday. Then he said, get me an offer all in, perhaps with a fitness component, whatever that means. She wanted to rejuvenate her career. She wanted to avoid the scarlet letter of being the other woman. So how are we going to solve all this? Then Dylan said that we're going to lay it on thick for her, the content guy. Karen was teetering between the National Enquirer versus ABC. This is her lawyer testifying, right? This is wild. So it's this woman who is trying to literally reignite her career, and Donald Trump is a means to an end. Her lawyer is explaining this in court in New York to the jury. I said, throw in an ambassadorship for me. I'm thinking the Isle of Man. It was a joke. Prosecutor says, why was that funny? Because they have no sense of humor. They are just walking automatons and NPCs. Well, I don't think that the Isle of Man is even a country, for one. So I don't think there's an ambassador there. So that's for one. But it was a reference to Trump, that if this helps him and he won, there would be jobs. Like if he wins, put me on as an ambassador. Okay. It's a funny joke. This dude, this poor lawyer, I don't know what his backstory is, but he sends a couple funny jokes, and now he's in the middle of testimony and he's saying, maybe I'll be an ambassador to Trump. And they're like, that's election interference. You tried to steal the election. Okay. Because you were helping to execute a standard NDA. It's like, what a joke. What are we doing right now? know. Anyways, he says, well, I don't think the Isle of Man is even a country. He has to explain it to this brain-dead prosecutor. So there's no ambassadorship there, but it was a reference to Trump. Maybe we'll get an ambassadorship. Now, what did Dylan Howard, the content guy, write in response? He said that she'll get more than from ABC from us. We'll give her a better deal. Don't worry about ABC. We'll make it happen, so hang tight. So they take their lunch break. We're back. Jurors are now back. Keith Davidson is back on the stand. Prosecutor comes out, says, good afternoon, Mr. Howard. Sorry, Mr. Davidson. Can you look at these texts? He says, sure. What was going on here? He says, well, in this text, Dylan, the content guy, wanted the deal between Karen McDougal and AMI to happen. He says, all right, let's make it happen. Dylan wrote, all right, F it. Not my money. I'll just ask. What do they want? They want 150. I'll just ask. Is the full F word written out in the text, says the prosecutor? He says, yes, it was. And then he wrote that she was getting pressed by Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda? Who's she? Oh, she worked for Brian Ross of ABC. Brian Ross. And Davidson says, and then AMI's general counsel, the lawyers for the National Enquirer and their team, sent me a contract that didn't jive with what had been negotiated with Dylan. So ABC's pressing her, give us your Trump story, right? Or whatever you've got. Negotiated with Dylan. So I get a look at this contract. I replied, I said, yo, need to handle this quickly, okay? The general counsel wanted me to call Michael Cohen. Call Michael Cohen? He said, did you ask why they wanted you to call Cohen when this contract came over and the terms were different? He says, I don't remember. He said, I had dealt with Cohen in 2011 and I had not enjoyed it, so I was trying to avoid it. Didn't want to call that guy. Did Dylan say anything else? The content guy from National Enquirer says, effing Jesus. He says, it's okay. You're just quoting. Did you call Cohen? Yes. And after the deal was closed with AMI, I called Michael Cohen as a professional courtesy about a deal involving his client. Well, what client? Donald Trump. Was Cohen a named party or was Trump a named party? He says no, but it benefited him. And Cohen was pleased that I reached out to him. Prosecutor says, well, based on non-privileged communications to which you were privy, what married man benefited from this? What married man? Amazing. Donald Trump. Now, how much money did you get from this deal? Wow. 45% of the 150K? Woo. Did you think AMI would ever publish this story? No. How come? Well, it was said that AMI would not want to hurt Karen's brand, but mostly there was an affinity between David Pecker and Trump. So, also not to hurt Trump. You mean Trump's campaign? Yes. Had ABC offered a role on Dancing with the Stars? He says, yeah, well, best efforts were discussed. Like maybe we could get her in there maybe. And Mr. Davidson, do you know Stormy Daniels? He says, yes. She was also a client of mine, also managed by Gina Rodriguez, right? Another talent agency for reality TV. And I spoke with them in 2011 about the dirty.com, whatever that is. Sounds disgusting. Now, prosecutor says, well, what was that about? There was a blog post that Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump had an intimate interaction. And Gina, the talent manager, told me that some jerk had called and threatened to sue. Who was that jerk? Donald Trump. And what was his accusation? Says, I don't know. He was just screaming and threatening to sue. So I sent a cease and desist letter and it was successful. Did there come a time when the interest in Stormy Daniels and the story increased? He says, yeah, Donald Trump's notoriety was growing. There was the Access Hollywood tape, that hot mic moment. It increased interest in Stormy Daniels' story. So I wrote, Trump is F. Dylan replied, they're kind of like bros now talking because this guy seemingly works in, national media stories as a lawyer and Dylan is the content guy. So he says, after Access Hollywood leaks, he sends a text, Trump is F, not that F. Dylan replied, wave the white flag, it's over, people. So these two guys have no faith. Now, and the next day, The Dirty republished the story. Dylan said, it could get worse. If Stormy made comments, the moral of the story was that Gina and Dylan came to terms. So content guy, they came to terms at 120 grand, but AMI would not go forward. So now Stormy comes out. It's like, oh, perfect. It's my time. She also wants to do the same thing that McDougal's doing. McDougal's like, I've got this great new thing going for me. Like, I'm going to get my boobs fixed. It's going to be great. Maybe on Dancing with the Stars, maybe. You never know. Stormy's like, great. I'd love to get my boobs fixed too. Great. So then she comes, another 120 grand. AMI says, we're not doing this deal like that one. Dylan asked Gina, the talent manager, to call Cohen. But she says, no, I'm not calling Cohen. She asked me to call Cohen and I didn't want to. Okay, so break that down. He says, bottom line, no one wanted to talk to Michael Cohen. Of course, man. No one does. That's why he's on TikTok doing hearts to weird kids on TikTok, doing quack, quack, honk, honk videos. I don't even know. No one wanted to talk to Michael Cohen. Of course not, man. That makes total sense. So Gina said, look, we have this deal. It's going to be the easiest deal you've ever had in your life. He laughs apparently ruefully. He's like, yeah, right. It's going to be the easiest deal ever. My text messages are being read in criminal court now. Great. She said, all you have to do is take that a-hole, talk to that a-hole Michael Cohen, and $10,000 was tacked on for me. Oh my gosh, this is hysterical. So Cohen is such a piece of work. One phone call to Michael Cohen was worth $10,000 to deal with him. Isn't that crazy? This is like, the jury is hearing all of this. That's hysterical. Look, it's going to be the easiest deal you've ever had. Just talk to Cohen. And so they dropped on another 10 grand for me for that phone call. All right, I'll call him. I'll do it for $10,000. She's like, fine, I'll pay you $10,000. He's like, okay, fine. What's this? He says, it's my email to Cohen and my firm's wiring instructions. And so who are the parties? He says, here's the party. Stormy Daniels versus RCI. That was an LLC that Cohen told me he was going to use to pay for this deal. So as resolution consultants, there was somebody named Peggy Peterson and David Dennison. Now, these are fake names, right? These are names that the contracts are executed under so they don't have to use their real names of Stormy and Karen. Is David Dennison a real person? Yeah, he is. He was on my high school hockey team. Says Davidson. Well, how does he feel about you now? He's pretty angry about it. This Davidson character is hilarious, man. Gosh. So he names Karen McDougal or Stormy Daniels NDA after his high school bro, hockey bro. Hey, dude, how you been? Hey, man, what do you do with my name? He's very angry about it. Or maybe they weren't friends in the first place. He's like, that piece of crap checked me that one time and I'm very unhappy about it. So he just names everybody as his high school bullies. I don't know. Davidson says, only the side letter agreement identified the parties and only Michael Cohen kept a copy of the side letter agreement. Is that rare to do it this way? Yeah. So why did Michael Cohen do it this way? Maybe he was in a bind moving money around. Maybe something's going on. I don't know. Is that rare? Yeah. Now, did you get paid by the deadline when all this was supposed to happen? He says, no. So I sent this email that you're looking at. Cohen told me that he couldn't send the money because of firewalls, whatever that is. Then that, he says, my guy is in 4 to 5 states today. It was clear that Cohen didn't have the authority to spend any money. Finally, he said, I'll just do it myself. Do you think the money was from him? He says, not until the funding. Well, who do you think the money was coming from? Objection from Trump's team. Overruled, speculation. Well, Donald Trump or some other corporate connection. So he's allowed to speculate. Now, so I wrote to all of them and said, all right, look, I'm out of this deal. Go in peace. I'm out. And how did Stormy Daniels react when you said, I'm done off this? So this guy just washed his hands of it. He's like, these people are whack. I'm out. 10 grand, not worth it at all. He just washes his hands. How did Stormy Daniels react? Well, I'm not going to answer that. It's attorney-client privilege. I can't talk about it. Okay, but did you get involved again? He says, yeah, but I don't know how I did. I said I'm out of here, but then I came back. I don't know how. He says, I thought Cohen was trying to kick it down the road until after the election, and the judge calls a break. Okay, so we'll pause for a break here. Now, jurors leave. Emile Beauvais is to the right of Trump. Seems he'll be doing the cross-examination whenever we get to it, and we're back from the afternoon break. Government says, Mr. Davidson, have you testified on this in the grand jury? Trump, objection, overruled. They approach, sidebar continues. Trump's alone at the defense tables, head cocked to the right. They're back from the bench. They say, question to Davidson from the government, who did you think was really paying this? He said, I don't know. I find that question very confusing. Well, when you were dealing with Michael Cohen, did you have an understanding about how this deal was going to be funded? Oh, I had an assumption. And to what did you attribute the lack of funding at this point? He says, I don't, frugality. Whose frugality? Objection. Susan Nicholas, again objecting, maybe heard at the sidebar. They're back. Government says, now we'd like to introduce these text messages. What does this one say? On that one, it says Dylan wrote, the AMI guy, says, I'm going to go see Pecker in 15 minutes. I'm going to ask him for an update on what we're doing on this. Did you respond? He says, yeah. I said, I'm waiting for a call any second. Let me know. From whom were you waiting for the call? I don't remember. Now, in sending this to Michael Cohen, what domain did you use to send this? Gmail.com. And what did you send? I sent him wiring instructions. He told me we're sending it. I said, I don't believe you. You're not sending anything. That he sent from trump.org, CCing his Gmail. All right. So we're always asking ourselves, what is the defense thesis of this case, right? If Trump is not behind this, well, is someone else behind it? Well, yeah, Michael Cohen is. So why is Michael Cohen doing all these strange things, CCing his Gmail, keeping a personal record of something that should be official for the Trump org, right? Now, this was 16 days after the agreement. Wire still had not come through. Then this email from First Republic came in, which he forwarded to me. Now, it meant nothing to me. He had my wiring instructions, but he didn't send any money, so I don't know why he sent that to me. Did you speak with him on the phone? Yeah, I did. And he was pants on fire. He was raging. And Michael Cohen was talking out of both ears, he says. Judge cuts this off, of course. We're going to break right here, and we're going to come back on Thursday. So right when this testimony is getting good, see how the judge is drawing the energy out of this? Cohen was pants on fire. Cohen's freaked out, you know. If I'm just speculating, I'm not saying Michael Cohen did this or his lawyers or anybody was helping doing this, but I'm speculating. Cohen needs money to being moved around. He's moving money around, setting up LLCs. Feels like he's very, very panicked. Is he going to lose his job? What's going on? So there's urgency all the time. No one wants to talk to this dude. And even the lawyers for the two women the lawyer for those two women is concerned with this dude, washes his hands of it, says, I don't want to talk to him. And right when we get to understand kind of the crescendo of what's happening here, judge calls a break. So interesting day of testimony. Pretty funny testimony from this Keith Davidson fella who has named his high school hockey bros in the Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal non-disclosure agreements. They're not too happy about that. But we're watching this theme develop. Who is really the source of this? Who's the mastermind behind all these deals? Was it Cohen who was birthing these and then trying to rectify them to be the hero? Very, very curious indeed. So we're going to continue to cover this. Now, Trump came out after the trial was over on the day, and he had a little bit to say about this. And here is his statement after the trial ended.
Okay, thank you very much. This gag order is not only unique, it's totally unconstitutional. I'm the Republican candidate for President of the United States. I received this honor in record time. Nobody's ever gone faster. It's never happened. Nobody's ever got the numbers that we got. And I'm sitting in a courthouse all day long listening to this stuff. And everybody knows, as far as everybody is concerned, if you read the great legal scholars and experts, everybody said this is a trial that is nonsense. It should have never been brought. That's showing loud and clear. You have a judge who's totally conflicted, totally, absolutely conflicted, that he's rushing this case through. Tell you what, somebody just told me they'd never sat for such a long period of time in a courthouse before. It's ridiculous. I'm supposed to be in Georgia. I'm supposed to be in New Hampshire. I'm supposed to be in Ohio and lots of other places. They have me sitting here for a Biden trial. It's a Biden trial. And I never saw so many prosecutors. They're all sitting in the room over nothing, over absolutely nothing. There's no crime. There's no anything here. And that's what these legal scholars say. How can you bring a case like this? Bragg didn't want to bring it. Bragg is the guy bringing it, and he didn't want to bring it. Went to every agency just about in law enforcement. They all turned it down as a joke. And I'm sitting here because that's exactly what they want. They don't want me on the campaign trail. But it's a real disgrace. And the whole world is watching. It's a disgrace to New York. And just like Enquirer is a disgrace to New York. We won that case because we won it on statute of limitations. And he turned down the appellate division. That's another case. It's all the same. He turned down the appellate decision, the appellate division's decision. They gave a decision that gave me mostly a win. Just about the whole thing was a win. And he turned it down. He's a corrupt judge. And this judge is terrible. And Kaplan is terrible. Gave a person, I have no idea who she is, $91 million. This is a corrupt system we're in. And I think the people are understanding it. If you look at the polls, the people of our country are understanding it. Thank you very much.
And so they are out of trial on Wednesdays. And so they will not be back until Thursday. We'll be back, of course, for day 10 when that happens. But that is what occurred on day 9 today. We're continuing to ask ourselves about this very curious relationship between Michael Cohen, what he was doing to create and instigate all of this conduct, now trying to create a new crime to stop Trump from being successful in 2024. We're going to be here continuing to cover it. Of course, we know that Keith Davidson is going to be back on the stand. Cross-examination of him should be pretty fun. And so we'll be back here to get into that when it occurs. Thank you for joining us as we do, my friends. Thanks for liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and inviting someone you know or love to come over here and join us. We are very grateful for those invites so that people can see what's ultimately happening here. I think the media is trying to bury the truth about this, just show people the headlines, but we help unpack it, and we're grateful for you and your invitations to come join us as we do. We also have great links in our description below, including our members-only community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where we do live streams in the morning 6 days a week, including on Saturdays. We get into a bunch of other stuff that we can't squeeze into here during these live streams. We'd love to have you join us. It's a great way to meet some amazing people and have some fun doing it. We'll see you over there and back here on the next one.